In our headlines on this Tuesday, June 10th, here in South Korea. President Jinping speaks on the phone with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping earlier today and agreed to advance bilateral ties for mutual benefit. The Korea Development Institute says the local economy remains weak amid the prolonged doldrums in the construction sector and slowing exports in light of U.S. tariffs. U.S. President Donald Trump mobilizes some 700 U.S. Marines and thousands more National Guard troops to L.A. to tackle protests against immigration raids. We start at the top office, where President Lee Jae-myung held phone talks with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping earlier on this Tuesday and extended a cordial invitation to this year's APEC summit, scheduled to take place here in South Korea this coming autumn. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
During his first half-hour phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping, President Lee Jae-myung invited him to South Korea for the upcoming APEC summit in the southeastern city of Gyeongju this November. If he does attend, it'll be Xi's first visit to the country in 11 years. Tuesday's conversation was friendly and amicable, says Lee's spokesperson, where Xi congratulated Lee on winning the election, and the two leaders shared similarities in their political career. Their focus was on building a new bilateral relationship, bolstering cooperation in areas that could practically help the lives of the people in both countries.
President Lee expressed hope that South Korea and China will actively promote exchanges and cooperation in various fields, including the economy, security, culture, and people-to-people exchanges based on the spirit of mutual benefit and equality.
Also addressed was North Korea, where Lee asked Xi to play a constructive role for the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, and Xi responded by saying Beijing will make efforts, saying peace and stability fit into their mutual interests. It's been a week since Lee took office, during which he exchanged greetings and held get-to-know sessions with the leaders of some major countries, first with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, followed by Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Then came talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
President Lee, during his presidential campaign, said that ROK-US alliance is the most top priority, and then he also put lots of emphasis on the relationship with Japan. Of course, he mentioned that South Korea and Japan, the trilateral cooperation is important. So he simply implement what he has pledged.
The series of talks comes as the newly inaugurated Korean leader prepares for his debut on the multilateral summit stage next week in Canada, where the G7 leaders are set to meet, where sideline summits are possible with Trump and Ishiba.
And all 7 countries share the same value that this liberal democratic country, and they also have the same goal to balancing against China. To participate this G7 meeting, even though we are not the member of G7, but as the observers, it can deliver the very significant message to China.
The upcoming diplomatic stage is also widely seen as a litmus test of how the new Korean president will navigate diplomacy, both with the U.S. and China in mind, as he puts forth pragmatic diplomacy. This as Korea also makes its comeback on the diplomatic stage official after a 6-month hiatus following the impeachment of the former leader. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
3 high-profile special prosecution bills were passed during a cabinet meeting presided over by President Lee Jae-myung earlier on this Tuesday morning. The probes will focus on the martial law declaration by former President Yoon Suk-yeol, allegations against former First Lady Kim Gun-hee, and the death of a Marine during flood relief operations back in the year 2023. These bills had been previously vetoed by the Yoon administration, but are now set to take effect. The South Korean economy remains sluggish amid the prolonged doldrums in the construction sector and slowing exports in light of U.S. tariffs. Now, this is according to the latest assessment by a state-run think tank. Our Moon Ji-young has more.
A state-run think tank has diagnosed that the South Korean economy remains subdued overall, noting escalating external uncertainties driven by U.S. tariff hikes. According to the June Economic Trends report released on Tuesday, the Korea Development Institute states that the country's economy is weighed down by continued weakness in the construction sector and a slowdown in exports. The agency stated that construction investment continued its decline, constraining recovery in domestic demand. Overall production growth is also slowing, with the construction sector notably contributing to this deceleration, posing a significant drag on the economy. Exports also showed weakening momentum, especially in sectors heavily exposed to U.S. tariff. This included a continued decline in exports to the U.S., with automobile shipments notably falling by 32% year-on-year. In contrast, manufacturing production maintained solid growth led by semiconductors, with persistent demand supporting robust growth in production, exports, and related equipment investment in this sector. Meanwhile, household and business sentiment showed modest improvement amid easing political uncertainties and progress in trade talks between Washington and Beijing. The Consumer Sentiment Index recovered to the baseline level in May, signaling an easing in the contraction seen since last year.
It seems the situation itself has improved compared to the first quarter. Since interest rate policy is now moving towards an easing stance, I think it might gradually contribute to an improvement in domestic demand.
However, the KDI warned that trade-related uncertainty remains high due to further increases in steel and aluminum tariff and concerns over a potential resurgence of U.S. China trade tensions. 문지영, Arirang News.
On a positive note, South Korea's current account remained in the black in April, but the surplus stood substantially lower on month amid the U.S.'s tariff campaign. Our Shin Se-byuk has the latest numbers.
South Korea posted a current account surplus of $5.7 billion in April. That marks 24 consecutive months in the black since May 2023. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, the surplus shrank sharply from the previous month, $9.1 billion. But it was still a notable jump from the $1.5 billion surplus recorded a year earlier. The decline was mainly driven by a sharp reversal in the dividend income balance, which swung from a $2.6 billion surplus in March to a $650 million deficit due to concentrated payouts to foreign investors. April's goods account, the largest component of the current account, posted a surplus of around $9 billion, backed by solid export performance. Exports rose nearly 2% on year to $58.6 billion, led by semiconductors and wireless devices. IT exports jumped almost 11%, while auto exports fell by just over 4%. Imports, meanwhile, fell 5.1% to nearly $50 billion, largely due to lower global energy prices, including coal and crude oil. The services account remained in deficit, posting a $2.8 billion shortfall in April, a wider gap than the previous month, as Korean firms spent more on tech licensing, consulting, and platform services. In the first 4 months of the year, the cumulative current account surplus reached nearly $25 billion, up almost $7 billion from the same period last year. But one expert pointed out that these figures reflect a period before new U.S. tariffs took effect and warned the surplus could narrow further in the month ahead.
Lower energy prices may ease imports, but Trump's tariffs could hit exports harder, narrowing the surplus compared to last year.
He also noted that with the global economy slowing, a sharp rise in stock prices is unlikely, and the gains in the primary income account are also likely to remain limited, further narrowing the overall surplus. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
In other news, passenger train service between Moscow and Pyongyang that were halted back in the year 2020 amid the pandemic will resume next Tuesday. According to Russian railways, the service will be available twice a month, with the train from Pyongyang departing on the 3rd and 17th of every month, and that from Moscow departing on the 12th and the 26th of each month. The one-way trip takes 8 days and is reportedly the longest direct train journey in the world, spanning over 10,000 kilometers. Over in London, American and Chinese delegates are resuming a second session of trade talks on this Tuesday, following their first session on Monday to address differences over the deal reached in Geneva. Our Park Chun-an covers these talks as well as their prospects by pundits here.
The United States and China on Monday discussed export controls, specifically the easing of U.S. technological export restrictions in exchange for greater access to China's rare earth metals. This was on the agenda for the first day of the second round of talks in London. According to a Financial Times report, U.S. President Trump said he could ease cheap exports to China if Beijing agrees to accelerate the export of rare earth metals and magnets to the United States. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer led the U.S. delegation. The Chinese side was headed by Vice Premier He Lifeng. While U.S. chip exports and China's control of rare earths could serve as leverage in negotiations, experts say the talks are unlikely to significantly improve market access for either side.
I don't think these trade talks are likely to bring fundamental changes in the U.S. China relationship at this point, and so the negotiations won't end here. Korea should keep a close eye on the situation and prepare appropriate responses.
On the surface, there may be some concessions between the U.S. and China. However, China can restrict rare earth exports at any time, and the U.S. is only partially easing controls on legacy semiconductors. Therefore, I believe this military-like battle for technological hegemony over high-tech industries between the two nations is likely to continue.
Earlier in May, the two countries agreed to significantly reduce tariffs on each other's goods for 90 days. However, following the Geneva Agreement, the United States claimed that China had violated the terms by maintaining export controls on rare earth metals, despite pledging to lift non-tariff barriers. China denied the accusation and instead accused the U.S. of taking discriminatory actions, such as canceling visas for Chinese students. Meanwhile, the two countries are set to hold further talks at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Park Chun-an, Arirang News.
In Los Angeles, protests against immigration raids persist, with the Trump administration now mobilizing some 700 U.S. Marines and thousands of additional National Guard troops to the area. Our Cho Soo-young has the latest.
Los Angeles faces the fourth day of protests against the Trump administration's immigration raids. At least 56 people have been arrested during the protests, according to NBC News. Protesters shut down major highways, throwing concrete and Molotov cocktails. Cars were burned to ashes, and police responded with tear gas and flashbangs, filling the streets with smoke. The Los Angeles Police Department declared the entire downtown area a no-protest zone on Sunday local time, concerned about the growing violence of the protesters. On Monday, the Pentagon deployed about 700 Marines to LA to support the National Guard. Around 2,000 National Guard troops had already been sent by U.S. President Donald Trump to control the situation without the governor of California's request.
Thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped, and a lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job.
In response, California's Governor Gavin Newsom said he will file a lawsuit against Trump over the activation of the state's National Guard. President Trump called Governor Newsom incompetent and supported arresting him after Tom Herman, the official in charge of border issues, warned that Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass could face arrest for interfering with immigration enforcement.
Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order.
Meanwhile, the protests that began in LA are now popping up in other major cities, including San Francisco and Chicago. In San Francisco, around 60 people were arrested during Sunday's demonstration. The protests were sparked when Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers and the FBI raided downtown shops in LA last Friday, detaining around 44 people. Cho Soo-young, Arirang News.
Much to the delight of BTS fans worldwide, members RM and V were discharged from the military service earlier this morning. The two members came together to thank fans for their unwavering support. The remaining three members are also set to return, with Jungkook as well as Jimin scheduled for discharge tomorrow, that is Wednesday, and Suga later this month. Jin and J-Hope completed their military service last year and have been pursuing solo music careers as anticipation mounts for the group's full return. A ceremony was held here in Seoul today to commemorate the 38th anniversary of South Korea's June 10 pro-democracy movement. Some 200 people, including government officials and politicians, were present for the solemn affair. In a written message, President Jae-myung asserted that democracy is advanced when the past is remembered to build the future. The event also marked the opening of the National Museum of Korea Democracy, located in what was once the Anti-Communist Investigation Office, a site notorious for state violence during the 1970s and 1980s military dictatorship. Ultimately, the country's pro-democracy campaign led to constitutional amendment, paving the path to direct presidential elections. A fire that broke out at around 10 a.m. on this Tuesday at a building within the compound of the historic Choge Temple here in capital Seoul was extinguished some 90 minutes later. Some 300 monks and officials from the Choge Order were at a meeting in the building's conference hall but were all safely evacuated. There have been no reports of casualties nor damage of national treasures. The cause of the fire has yet to be confirmed. Up next, a showcase here in Seoul suggests botanical gardens may be the key to sustainable solutions to some environmental concerns. Our Pyongyang files this report.
Environmental issues are a global challenge. But there's one solution that can boost biodiversity and cool the local environment: botanical gardens and arboretums. An event in Seoul is opening a new chapter in exploring their role in tackling environmental issues. The 11th International Congress on Education in Botanic Gardens.
From June 9th to 13th, the COEX Ground Ballroom has been transformed into a global hub of botanical garden education, where ideas take root and grow into solutions for a greener future.
The Global Forum on Botanical Garden Education comes to East Asia for the first time. This year's theme is Education for Change, Botanic Gardens' role in addressing global challenges. At the core of the conversations is the importance of working together as a community to mitigate environmental challenges. Keynote speaker Choi Jae-chun posed the idea that the COVID-19 pandemic was the result of imbalances in biodiversity.
If this severe imbalance in biodiversity isn't addressed in some way, we'll continue to face situations like this repeatedly. It's simply a matter of probability.
He highlighted the importance of botanical gardens as a means to promote biodiversity and raise interest in environmental conservation. Another keynote speaker, Shahbaz Khan, discussed the vital role of UNESCO in reversing climate change and highlighted botanical gardens as key tools in building sustainability.
The botanical gardens are important for keeping the cities cool, and they can be an answer to increasing temperatures. They can help us reduce the needs for the air conditioning, for example.
He pointed to thermal images of a city which showed how places with gardens had cooler temperatures and underscored the importance of botanical gardens in conserving plant species. Over the course of 5 days, participants are engaging in workshops, panel discussions, and a field trip to the Korea National Arboretum as they work toward a greener, more sustainable planet. Botanical artwork brings a colorful, creative layer to the educational experience, while booths showcase various contributions to environmental preservation. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Israeli naval forces have intercepted a yacht carrying climate activist Greta Thunberg and 11 others while it was attempting to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. The Israeli Navy boarded the British-flagged yacht Madeleine, operated by the pro-Palestinian Freedom Flotilla Coalition, detaining Thunberg and a French lawmaker among those who were on board. On early Monday, the vessel was seized approximately 185 kilometers from Gaza in international waters and escorted into a port in Israel by the evening. Israeli officials confirmed the activists were unharmed and will be deported after undergoing medical checks. They said that the yacht's cargo of symbolic aid such as baby formula, rice, and medical kits will enter Gaza through official Israeli aid channels. While Thunberg denounced the interception as kidnapping, Israel dismissed the mission as a media stunt and called the aid boat a selfie yacht. Governments in Sweden, France, and Spain have lodged consular requests, and France's President Macron has demanded swift repatriation. The boat departed from Italy on June 1st to raise awareness of the conditions in Gaza. Ukraine and Russia began the first stage of a multi-phase prisoner exchange, repatriating servicemen under the age of 25, following a humanitarian agreement reached during peace talks. On Monday, the first phase of a prisoner swap agreed on in Istanbul on June 2nd took place, involving young military prisoners and severely wounded individuals. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the exchange in his evening address, emphasizing a phased approach over several days and thanking all parties involved. Although specific numbers were undisclosed, both nations affirmed an equal exchange of prisoners. Despite conflicting claims over the exchange between the two nations the previous day, the exchange marks hope for broader negotiations, aimed at exchanging at least 1,200 prisoners from each side and repatriating fallen soldiers. Apple unveiled its liquid glass design and advanced AI upgrades in iOS 26, its first major visual overhaul since iOS 7, during its Worldwide Developers Conference on Monday. The liquid glass interface introduces translucent, refractive UI elements across all platforms, including iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, and TV. AI enhancements powered by Apple Intelligence include live translation in Messages, FaceTime, and the Phone app, all of which are processed on device. The public beta of iOS 26, including liquid glass and AI features, launches this summer, with the full release slated for this fall. Labubu dolls, a toothy plush toy from Chinese maker Pop Mart, have seen a surge in popularity and price worldwide. Created by Hong Kong artist Ka-Sing Leung and marketed since 2019, Labubu shot to fame after being spotted with celebrities like Rihanna, Dua Lipa, and Blackpink's Lisa. Collectors, mostly adults, are drawn by the blind box format of the collectibles, which offers randomly packed variants, some rare versions, fueling a global frenzy. Official retail prices range from about $20 to $30, but resale values have exploded from $100 to $7,000 for rare editions. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
In the central parts of the country, it was cloudy and rainy today. The daytime temperature did not rise significantly. The temperature in Seoul rose up to only 26 degrees Celsius, which is about 4 degrees lower than yesterday. However, the East Coast and southern areas continue to be hot during the day. It will be hotter tomorrow across the country. In addition, strong winds will blow around the eastern parts of Gangwon-do province until tomorrow morning. There will be places with gusty winds of more than 15 meters per second. Not only that, Jeju Island will receive frequent rain until Saturday. Tomorrow morning will start cool with Seoul and Daejeon at 16 degrees, Chuncheon at 14 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 29 degrees in Seoul, Daejeon, and Gwangju, 27 degrees in Busan. There is rain forecast starting from the Chungcheong provinces in southern areas on Friday and spreading to the whole country on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, that ends our newscast for now. Thank you for watching.